This next video is going to explain a simple CPM or TNMM. Those acronyms are a simple comparable profits method or transactional net margin method. We're going to start from an example that we've been presenting in many of our earlier videos, the base case of a Japanese related party selling products to a UK related party who is distributing those products. We have 10 units of products being sold at £7 per unit. So Japan Co. is selling these products at 70. It has no other business. And the UK Co. is buying those, so it's showing up in their cost of goods sold as 70. That is the only business they have is selling the product that they're buying from Japan Co. The consolidated operating profit between the two entities is 15. So what would a comparable profits method or TNMM look like in this case? Well, we may be able to establish that the £7 per unit transfer price is within the arm's length range, meaning it's a price that parties who are unrelated to each other would have agreed to, did transact at in a similar transaction under similar circumstances. With the comparable profits method, we're going to find evidence to support that that price is correct, or find out what prices would be correct or would be arm's length, by looking at comparable uncontrolled companies that are highly similar. So our UK company in this example is a distributor. Let's suppose we went out and we found another distribution company that was uncontrolled, not a related party to anyone, bought its goods that it's going to sell, so its cost of goods sold is essentially established in uncontrolled transaction and sells to unrelated parties. So it has an operating profit that's not tainted at all by internal transfer pricing that we need to worry about. And in this case, you can see we have an example of a firm here, and they have an operating profit of 8. All right, the first issue here is that we can't compare the operating profit level for level, dollar for dollar, because these companies are operating on two different scales. The uncontrolled company has got double the sales of our tested party, the UK company. So if we're going to apply the transactional net margin method, we need to create a common measure of the profitability. And in this case, we're going to use one that's used frequently, and that is we're going to look at their operating margins. Since we can't compare the dollar amount, we'll ask the question of, is the UK's operating margin, which is operating profit divided by sales, about equal to that of the comparable uncontrolled distributor, who's got an operating margin calculated as the operating profit of 8 divided by sales of 200, or 4%. Well, those two numbers are actually pretty close. They're not exactly the same, but that would be pretty good evidence that the UK company is not far off the mark. In reality, though, we would never really want to go with just one observation point. We'd like to see if we could find a lot of them. So imagine if we went out and we searched very specifically to find other firms comparable to the UK company. Distributors in the same market, at the same level of market, say wholesale versus retail, geographic region the same, all those other factors. Maybe the level of asset intensity, if we want to screen on that, the sales to asset ratio. We make sure they don't have intangibles if our tested party has no intangibles. We go out and we try to find a whole set of companies that are out there. So in this simple example, you can see I've found 4 comparables. The first one is the one that was on the previous slide. We're going to call them Able Company now. They're the ones with the sales of 200 and the operating profit of 8. And then I found 3 other comparables, Baker Company, Charlie Company, and Delta Company. They all have different levels of sales and different results. And it's from looking at a range of comparables that we're able to determine what is the range of arm's length pricing, which is very important, because what we want to do is be able to argue that our tested party is earning a profit that is in that range. And if it's not, we may be recommending to our client that they may need to change their transfer pricing so as to end up in that range, or find some other explanation for why they wouldn't be. So in this case here, what I want to do is really run an example of what the range is all about, and I'm going to ask you to calculate the operating margins of these 4 companies. Now, we've already calculated the one for Able Company, so you need to do the 3 more: Baker Company, Charlie Company, and Delta Company. And The reason why I want you to do that is you're going to sort of start to get your hands onto the numbers. So just pause the video right now, take a moment, calculate those numbers on a sheet of paper, because our key question I'm going to ask you next is, what is the range from the lowest to the highest from these four companies, Able, Baker, Delta, Charlie, and Delta? And we'll come back in just a minute and see if you can tell me which of these is the right answer. Okay, well, hopefully you've started the video back up because you've done the calculations. We start off with these companies. We want to know what their operating margins are to know what that range would be. So our question is, what is the range of the operating margins of the four companies? And the correct answer is D. The range is from 2.5% for Delta Company to 8.33% for Charlie Company. Positively for our client, their 5% falls nicely within this range, and they can arguably say that it would appear that their transfer prices are defensible because they're earning about the same amount of profit as the others would earning, at least on a proportional basis. If you think about it, how far off would this have to be out of this range? Well, it's actually a pretty good range. If the UK had paid 73 for this product, we raised that price from 70 up to 73, not a particularly big jump. That would lower their operating profit down to 2 and their operating margin to 2%, which would actually make them below the range. So we know the arm's length range is below that 73, and at the other end, had they paid £66 and 50p for the product, then their operating profit would have been higher, right? Because it would have been reducing their amount that they had to pay for their cost of goods sold. And in fact, it would have been so high that it actually would have been above Charlie Company's operating margin. And that tells us where this range is, that the payment from the UK company to Japan for the units that were delivered, the arm's length range would be somewhere between roughly 66 pounds and 50p up to 73 pounds, roughly. I haven't done the numbers precisely out there. And that tells us what the arm's length range would all be about. So that's the essential conclusions of doing a comparable profits method or a transactional net margin method. Finding comparable companies, determining the range of their results, picking a good profit level indicator, something we'll talk about in future videos because the operating margin isn't the only one to consider, and then determining whether your tested party is within that range or not. Now, could we have done this exercise from the manufacturer's perspective? Absolutely. Here we're back to our base case, and the whole issue here would be, what if we went out and we searched for a comparable firm in Japan or in that general market region doing the same thing that Japanese company is doing, which is manufacturing as opposed to distribution. And we could go out and search for those firms, and we might do well and find one. And if we found, said, a comparable Japanese manufacturer, and here we have one that has got a P&L that is, again, its sales level is double that of the Japan company who's a related party for us. But if you notice in this case, I made it kind of simple. They both earned exactly the same markup above costs. So while we earned a profit of 10, but our total costs were the combination of cost of goods sold and operating expense of 60, the comparable company earned an operating profit of 20. That's twice as much as us, but their cost of goods sold, 80, and their operating expense, 40, add up to a number that's twice our operating cost plus cost of goods sold. So our return above the cost base in both cases is exactly the same, 16.67%. Now, in reality, if we were going to really do this analysis, we'd want to find more than just one comparable firm. We'd want to find a whole bunch of them, see what the ranges of results is on that side of the transaction, and see whether our 16.67% is in that range. So the transactional net margin method, the comparable profits method, both of these in this case are comparing the net cost plus markup of the tested party to the net cost plus markup of a comparable, and this is very important, uncontrolled firm. So this firm does not have transfer pricing issues. Its profit and loss statement is not distorted at all by the possibility of a bad transfer price. Since they're exactly equal, we can easily conclude that therefore the transfer price must be meeting the arm's length standard. Now this is a simple example, and we've only provided you with the income statement. In a more realistic situation, we also would have been providing balance sheet data for the tested party, and you could consider other profit level indicators like the return on assets. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please enjoy all the videos in this series and have a great day.